My name is Marc. I am a investigative journalist, podcaster, storyteller, and for the last 6 years, I've been running The Dark Mind Detective, a podcast that I'm proud to say have reached a global reach in the top 1.5%. And this is my first podcast where I'm now going into a new direction. I want to expand my audience to a bigger, broader audience now. I'm very appreciative for everything I learned in the last 6 years, but I did learn some pretty tough lessons. And I'm here in this episode to kind of share my journey, the good, the bad, the ugly. Hopefully, as we move forward, you, the listener, can learn from my trial and errors, things that I've been through, and hopefully you can avoid them as well, because there's a couple of things, right? There's a dark side to social media. I'm here to talk about that as well. There's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of wonderful things about social media. I met some amazing people. Without my platform, without my reach, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to talk to some amazing people. I've talked to forensic doctors about some of the cases I've researched. I researched some of the scariest, darkest cases in human history. I've researched over 150 serial killers. I've researched over 1,000 missing person cases. And I come from an area where thousands of people go missing under very mysterious circumstances. It's actually the area where I live. It's the highest missing person rates, probably across United States and Canada, but definitely across my nation. And it's 3 times the national average. So I've been researching strange clusters of missing persons for a long time, since about 2007. And as we get more deeper into this series, I am going to do a breakdown of these clusters of cases. I've researched cases in Vancouver, BC. I've been researching cases in Chicago, Illinois. And I've also been researching cases in Austin, Texas, New York State, and across Canada and across the United States. I also do a lot of work and research on missing Indigenous women. We, in a province, there's a place called Highway of Tears, and a lot of strange, mysterious cases of that. And down the road, I will be breaking down those cases. But primarily, this new podcast, it's called Dark Realities, and it's going to focus on a few different areas. It's going to go into serial killer cases. I'm going to go abroad across, but I'm going to look at them differently. We're going to look at things from a multifaceted angles. We're not going to just look at what's already been reported, and we're going to look at it from a variety of angles. But I'm not trying to create like a conspiratorial slant. So together, as we break down these cases, we're going to look into what we know from an investigative point of view and rule out the practical aspects of these investigations, especially some of the really baffling missing men cases. We're going to really break down what we know, how, and then rule those things out before we get into the spookier stuff, right? There are some amazing researchers out there, and I'm not into the whole calling people out bullshit. And there are some people who've done some amazing storytelling, and they really break down these cases, and they have me over the coals. I feel like I'm at a campfire because they're so good at telling these stories. And you know, they've convinced me. And then I feel that sometimes, not all the time, they cherry pick a narrative to try to fit into these, to make the cases spookier than they have to be when they already are pretty terrifying. And one of the things that I have been doing for the last 6 years especially is I try my best to work with victims' families, because at the end of the day, right, when something terrible happens to your son, your daughter, your loved one, they go missing in a way that is just horrifying. In almost every case that I've worked with, the families have never been satisfied with the investigation. And a lot of times they get handled pretty rough by investigators. And then there's the media component to it, where the media comes in and suddenly they sit down with them and they talk really nice to them. And then they publish something that really didn't have much to do with the conversation. And the families will talk to me and say, hey, we told them this and we told them that, and they never said that. And the article is either very soft, boiled down, like, or it's a hit piece. And then they call back to the media person and says, hey, you got this wrong and that wrong, and you said this. And they're like, oh, did we? Oh, that's too bad. Oh. So then there's that, right? And I'm friends with a lot of victims of families, and they've been treated very rough, right? Not only by the system, but also by the media and also by the investigators. Like I could tell you guys stories that would really upset you. So I really aim to do things differently here, right? I come from a compassionate place first. These were real people. They had loved ones. These people, they didn't want to be victims. So then it comes to the other aspect of what's important in my series. And I'm really a big believer in what I call dark psychology. And I use dark psychology as an umbrella term because, quite frankly, for the last little while, all we hear is narcissist. And then, of course, there's narcissist. But I think that narcissism brush gets painted too broadly. So instead, I say dark psychology. Dark psychology is manipulative, toxic behavior that's used against you or used against a person to facilitate either criminal behavior, abuse, or trauma. Over the last 6 years, I have worked with so many people that's been on the receiving end of it. And quite frankly, I've been on the receiving end of it as well. I really have. I want to, not only for myself, but hopefully for you, the listener, because I want to give you tools and shields against this type of behavior, because in my experience and my research, every victim starts off as being manipulated. Get into a relationship. The relationship, of course, is always good at first, but then, something turns around and maybe they're not like abusive, like smack you or hit you, but they're distant, they're cold. And so all of a sudden it's a game of hot and cold, pulling levers, pulling strings, carrot and stick. And then over time, the behavior and the abuse gets worse and worse and worse. And when people who are predators, and there's people that are good at this, like we get into the realm of social engineering, manipulation, even mind control, stuff that cults use, right? And I'm a big believer that everything is on a spectrum. On the low spectrum, it's subtle. It's you can't quite place it. And then if you call them on it, right? They have something to say. It's all in your head. I've met a lot of people. I have also a corporate sales background. And before that, I did stockbroking. Before that, I worked in construction. I've been around all kinds of different behaviors. I also worked in the nightclub world where I've been exposed to a whole spectrum of behaviors. But universally, these toxic behaviors are a pattern. Sometimes they're applied overtly, very aggressive, coercive, and sometimes they're very applied subtly. And there's people that are very skilled at it, very slick. So I mean too. So I want to give you guys tools. This is not a podcast that's going to be about this fire hosing you with morbid and terrible facts and gore and stuff. And trust me, my head is full of it from the cases I've witnessed. And plus too, I have some pretty amazing confidential sources. I have sources that have been in the highest realms of organized crime. I've talked to some people off the record about the darkest stuff that goes on the dark web, human trafficking, even stuff like red rooms. And people, no, red rooms don't exist. Yes, they do. They do. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about a story that kind of got me on this journey a long time ago and really opened my eyes to this horror that is now more of a prevalent reality that we are facing. Back in 2000, I went to school. I went to school for programming, computer skills, and, learn all the different graphic design programs. And I even took a desktop printing program to learn how to make stuff like, in print shops and posters and magazines. And then I took a lot of back-end stuff like program back in the day when it was JavaScript and HTML and that kind of thing. Classes at night because I was a real night owl because I came from the club scene. and I wanted a change in my life. So I wanted new skills. So I decided this whole internet thing seems to be blowing up. And so I started taking these courses. So I met this guy. He became a roommate of mine, and he was doing more like computer, like science courses, and kind of in a different direction. I was doing more front end development. He was more on the back end development, right? Servers, that sort of thing. And one day I'm drinking with this guy. I don't know him very well, right? And I lived in this big actually it was a quadplex. So it had 4 units in this one big house. So it was like this place was huge. The part that I lived in had 3 bedrooms. So to help out with, school and stuff, I rented out 2 of the bedrooms, and I lived in one with my girlfriend. You get the ideas, right? So we had 2 other roommates. So this guy had 1. And one day, we're having some beers and stuff, yucking it up. And then he looks at me, he goes, "Hey, I want to show you something," right? And I was like, okay. And he pulls up his computer, right? We go up to his, because this is back when there was no, laptops were around, but everyone had desktops. So I go in his room, right? And he fires up the desktop, and then he starts typing around, and he goes to some kind of message board, and then he pulls out some folders and on his computer. And he showed me some of the most horrific pictures I have ever seen. And I don't really want to say what was on them because, again, I'm putting this on YouTube and Rumble. I don't want to get doxxed with community guideline strikes as I'm just starting to roll out my stuff, but it was horrifying. It was absolutely horrifying. The pictures was of a young woman, and the pictures looked like they were taken by professional photography, very clear, very crisp, very good lighting. And, this is before there was no AI, there was no really good graphic design programs. And it was shocking because I've never seen anything like this. And remember, this was back in 2000. I've never seen anything like that. And I honestly, I felt nauseous because I've never, ever seen anything like that. I never even heard of anything like this. And he seemed like the look on his face, he became very animated and his eyes just looked fucking crazy. And I'm just looking at him in a new light. And then he starts showing me all these message boards, where men can gather and do this kind of stuff, and countries that have like the most lenient laws, and where, and all the tricks of how to do it and get away with it. And this horrible. And I was shocked, and I felt sick, and it felt like I instantly sobered up, and I couldn't talk for about 10 minutes. And then finally I just said to him, I said, "Dude, you got to move out. You got to move out." Cause now I'm thinking this guy's into this stuff here with my girlfriend in this place. And then there was another woman living in the other room. I'm like, this guy's a creep. Like, this guy's a bona fide creep. So remember, this was 2000 and the internet. So people back then were organizing, facilitating the most darkest, horrific crimes, predators. So imagine what it is now. And I've done a lot of investigation on this. So my aim for these series is, 1, inform you. We'll talk about historic cases. We'll get into the dark depths of these cases. And we're going to use mainstream forensic research before we get into the spooky stuff. And then we're going to teach you how to avoid becoming a victim. All, myself included, we all can be manipulated. We all can be played. There are some good people out there, and there's cyber wolves out there. There are people out there that want to do you harm, like the scary people. And then in my last 6 years, right, I've had this kind of been on the receiving end of a lot of bad behavior. So again, my platform, this was what I was all about. I'm not about controversy. I'm not about trying to get views and likes and all that kind of stuff. My platform that I built on Instagram exploded. I had different platforms before. I had a fitness one, I had mindset and motivation and that kind of thing. And then I did a true crime platform back in about 2019, and it just went kaboom. I was getting 1,000 followers a week. And at its peak, I hit about 50,000. But the thing was, it just, the toxic people I would deal with, just people that would really make me sick. I did a case about a woman. Her friend reached out to me, and this woman was from Australia, and she was murdered in front of her son. and a very awful domestic violence. If you go on my Spotify and scroll down, you can find it. Like a really heartbreaking case. It's just absolutely awful. I'm interviewing her friend's talking about her life, what a great person this was. And it brought out the creeps. Like it really did. Like I was just blocking people. They were like just saying the most awful stuff. And when I would get mad, oh, you're a snowflake. No, I'm not a snowflake. This is someone's mother. This child saw hers, right? So there's a dark side. Brought out some weird things. So I got tired of it. I got tired of like these weirdos. So I decided to become the dark mind detective, where I look at things in a very more forensic, more of a deep dive, analytical way, and to my credit, I built a great following from that. I've interviewed many like forensic doctors about the cases and stuff, because I feel that these cases are not just entertainment. These are tragedies. So I'm kind of creating new ground rules now, right? Because I have to preserve my health, right? I can't deal with the Karens, the people that just want to scold me because, I posted this and I posted that. And to fairness, after my wife died in 2020, I was in kind of deep trauma. So I would kind of make myself available to lots of people. I'd answer every DM. And there's a lot of people that when you become too familiar with you, they just see it. It's just too easy for them just to be unpleasant and be kind of shitty. So I'm building my self boundaries more as I move forward and build more of a bigger platform. And one of the things I'm going to really deep dive back into is books that have helped me through the years. So one of the books I'm really going to get into is 48 Laws of Power. I read this book first in 2000. I went to chapters. I used to read a lot, and I still do. But back then, I would try to force myself to read a book a week. I went into chapters, and I saw this book, and it really stood out. It was orange and royal blue, and it had these gold letterings of 48 Laws of Power, and the words power horizontally down. It was unlike any book I've ever read. It was like it combined history, it combined life lessons, it provided examples. Yeah, truly amazing book. And I used to make myself read it every year, kind of because these are the tools that people use universal. And I've seen it in every aspect. I've seen it on the construction site. I've seen it in the nightclubs. I've seen it in the boardrooms. I've seen it in the stockbroker boiler rooms. These are the tools. They're universal, right? As the Romans would say, nothing new under the sun. Like these rules are really ancient tricks of humanity, of how to have power over people. Book acted as my shield, and I'm going to review it again because I need it again. Because, man, I've been through a lot of bullshit 6 years, and I don't want to go through it anymore. And the biggest bullshit I've gone was accepting people in my inner circle so then they can abuse you. And abuse is very subtle. And there's punch you out abuse, or there's this shitty cutting remarks or scolding. Like people don't know you well, don't have the right to scold you about your thought process. They don't. Like I don't understand. And I've never done this, where someone posts, a story, and I used to post news because I wanted to share, breaking news stories. Doesn't mean I agree what happened in the news. News is like, oh, look what happened today. And then I get the Karens. Oh, why are you talking about this and that? But they never say it like that. First, they insult you. It's always like the first line, it's an insult, and you're just supposed to take it, right? But what I'm saying, happening once or twice, whatever, you're going to meet shitty people. But when you get a constant barrage, they're like pebbles in your shoe, right? They become quite unpleasant. And then over time, it's like, I'm doing all this work, people and tragedy, and you want to nitpick, right? So no more nitpicks, right? And this is what I mean about the laws of the 48 Laws of Power. It becomes your shield to all types of manipulation. Even allowing someone to subtly nitpick you, make snide remarks, make comments about you. It's disrespectful. And they're trying to exert a certain level of power over you. And then there's the government. The government is very different now than when I was raised. The government wants you powerless because the less power you have, the less you can stand up for yourself. So again, to recap, what this podcast is about, the program is about conditioning, mind control, dark psychology. And then how are these principles, these techniques are used in the most awful circumstances by predators and evil people that truly want to do you harm. And also, this podcast is about empowerment, how to have a shield, how to create boundaries, how to have no more room for nitpickers, shit talkers, people that try to undermine you, the people that pretend that they're your friend, but they're jealous of you. And like I said, I went through a real, crazy roller coaster ride in the last 6 years of this platform. I came out on the other side tougher, more determined, more focused. But there's times where it really did affect my mental health, where I'm in the deep, darkest weeds of some of the most grotesque, darkest, deprived cases that the government essentially covered up or just really softballed it to make it being like, oh, too bad, serial killers exist. Nothing we can do about it. Where we're just like, what? The next target? And then there's going to write some little softball article. Oh, too bad. Marc shouldn't have been out late that night. Right? So there's this weirdness in our society that I don't like. I really don't like it. I want to be understanding of what is happening to us. Right? Why are we always pushed in these little directions and keep pushed and pushed and pushed until it's like you don't even recognize where you are anymore? So I want to bring back mental sovereignty, the ability to critical think. And by doing this, we're going to apply this to some of these really baffling cases. Like I said, missing men cases have troubled me for a long time because there's a lot of them and they're very strange. I study cases that are very upsetting. They're the missing Indigenous women, and they are hugely widespread, not talked about. Awful as this to say, they make the perfect victims for these predators because they get away with it. And they continue to get away with it over and over and over again. And then these missing men cases are even more baffling because they're the complete opposite of a lot of the women cases, because these boys are just like normal kids going to school, hanging out with their friends, going to college. They disappear off the face of the earth. And some of the cases I've researched, they disappear out of their bedroom. They're last seen going up in their bedroom saying, "Good night, Mom. See you in the morning. Can you make pancakes for breakfast?" And never be seen again. I really want to have a real examination of these cases, the clusters throughout North America. And like I said, we're going to check off the list of all of the, conventional possibilities of these cases. So I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, for example, there's these strange cases like out in the woods, for example. Again, I live in an area where it's heavily wooded. Lots of people go missing. Sometimes people go missing because an animal, right? Again, or they slip and fall some more treacherous path. Because I grew up in the wilderness and did a lot of camping, and I know a lot of people that do search and rescue. Search and rescue people usually know their area very well, and they know the spots that are problematic and troubling. And the thing is, the difference between when you're out in the wilderness, you have a backpack. You have, a lot of times you're wearing hiking boots. So you're heavy. So it makes clear footprints when you're walking on a trail. So if someone attacks you, let's say, some crazy person living out in the woods, you're going to see the scruff marks. You're going to see the event happening. Animals, it's messy, it's bloody. A big bear, oh yeah, you're going to know that. And a lot of times in these areas, there's one way in and one way out. So we're going to rule those things out first before we get to the spooky stuff, right? And there's some strange stuff out there. There really is. I truly believe life is stranger than fiction. Then on the other side of it, someone goes missing in the urban area, which to me is a little more frightening. Because it's like this, right? Say you're a woman, good-looking woman who keeps in really good shape, and, you're wearing your athletic gear and you jog the same path every day, at that same time, 3:00. You go to a park, go on a running trail, you have your headphones in, you get to your car, maybe you do a little stretching before you get in. You don't notice there's a dude in a van who's been watching you the last 3 days. Or let's say you're an attractive young man, right? And you work, let's say, at a coffee barista every day at 10 o'clock. You're doing your closing shift. You throw the garbage away in the dark back alley, knowing there's some creeper stalker who's been waiting for you, who's been watching you for the last 5-6 months. And you don't even know that, right? Because I'm saying there are some creeps out there. I've experienced creeps. And in this podcast, I'm going to share a lot of my own personal experiences. So hopefully you can learn from the things that I've been through. So again, welcome to the program where we shed light on the darkest realities. I want to thank you for listening for the first one. Please join me on Spotify and iTunes where I can talk about these cases in a little bit more detail, because again, this specific talk that I'm doing in this one is going to be for YouTube and Rumble, and I don't want to get off on the bad start because the censorship, it's hard to understand what you can say or can't say, and I don't really want to talk like a toddler and say pew pew and unalive. I want to talk to you guys like you're adults, right? So thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to come back here. Hopefully you'll come back and join me again tomorrow, because I'm going to be doing this 5 days a week. Each conversation is going to be between half an hour to an hour each day, and we're going to keep building onto these cases as we go farther and farther and deeper into these darker cases. So again, my name is Marc. I am an investigative journalist, storyteller, deep dive researcher of serial killers, predators, and dark psychology.